Hello, my name is Wole Oyenuga with Urban Oasis Development.
Dixon, Urban Oasis Development, principal and co-founder. Urban Oasis Development is a residential and commercial real estate development firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. We're really excited about crafting developments that really promote inclusive, flourishing neighborhoods.
Well, what started our inspiration was doing something different. We were building houses on the east side of town and hiring houses, but we wanted to do something that was more community focused, something that aligned with both of our missions of just making the world a better place through the building environment, and that's why we started Urban Oasis. Well, that's a long story. So Joel and I met back in college about 20 something years ago. We can't say our age because we have to make sure black doesn't crack and we look younger than we are. But we stayed friends ever since. He was originally from Atlanta. I moved to Atlanta actually to start in corporate America, the music business, and eventually moved into real estate development. And then he started investing in some of the housing developments that we were doing, and eventually just had a vision of what development could look like, and decided to partner up in, I don't know what, 2017, 18.
Yeah, so, and a part of it is that both of us have a technical background. So I was doing technology, startup tech at the time, but I was always impressed with the work that Wole was doing, on the building and construction side in neighborhoods that historically had been really neglected. Fast forward, we really recognized that while he was being successful in developing, that we were not taking into account what that development was unfolding. A lot of people call it gentrification. At the time, we just called it being financially responsible and making money. But I will say right around the time of, kind of 2015, 2016, I really started thinking about, maybe there's a better way. And we had the base down, which is quality product, quality design. So now it's wrapping around that. Okay, how do we do this in neighborhoods where we can help transition and transform without displacing and disrupting? And so that was really the birth of, our partnership. I said I can definitely figure out, more from a business development and community and funding side, as long as Wole would come alongside and provide the technical capacity around, building construction and of course, great designs.
Yeah. Oh, our first project together, that's funny. That was a house we were going to do in Adair Park that Joel decided to keep for himself.
Hey, it was a winner, man. I mean, it was one of those things where actually my now wife at the time we were dating, we're going through different neighborhoods trying to figure out one, where we should start, Urban Oasis Development's first project, and we landed in a community called Historic Adair Park. I loved it, she loved it, and it's interesting because one of the streets that we ended up on was a street that we were like, hey, if and when we buy a house here, we want it on the street. Well, house ended up coming up by our agent not too long after that. I brought it to Wole, and yeah, we definitely had designed it. It's like, hey, this should be the first house that we launch on this west side of town. However, as we got started on it, I mean, once again, he's a product. It's really his fault, because he said such a great design on the renovation, the execution. And so me and Suzanne were like, hey, we can wait, me and my wife, or we can just start here and make it our own. And so, yeah, I will say, I guess, I ate my own supply, but, it worked out. It worked out.
Yeah. Career highlights. I say for me, the couple. I say when we won the Obie Awards for some of the houses. The Obie Award is one of the Home Builder Association awards for best houses. And even though we're small, we're competing against some of the bigger national builders. The fact that we could win an award for one of those houses was pretty impressive. But actually, I come back to now, to me, the great thing is I think we keep getting better. So I'd say one of our great accomplishments, at least on the single family side, would be this design of these houses, the Three Palms. It's been a vision in like culminating for a long time, and to actually see it to fruition finally and actually have the product here, like, to me, that's a big accomplishment for us.
And I'd say for me, I look at it more holistically, and that is the transformation that we've been able to be a part of in several neighborhoods. One of our models was that we were going to be a community-centered developer, and that meant living in the neighborhoods where we're going to develop. And so as I moved in, Wole also moved in, we've really seen that neighborhood go from being the hood to being somewhere that's, highly attractive. A lot of people are interested in getting in. And so that's been exciting to be a part of seeing that transformation and transition, but also help our neighbors and others really position themselves so that they don't get displaced. While it still happens, we certainly feel like it's happening at a much slower pace and a much more inclusive approach. I also say for me that we recently had an opportunity to be selected for an RFP as a finalist for a 22-acre site on the Beltline. I remember moving into my house, which looks at this particular site, and thinking I just love one day to just participate, even if I was just sweeping, the floors on the project. And so now to have an opportunity to take what will be a very catalytic project of 22 acres and once again unfold our method as well as our approach, community-centered, access to housing, affordability, high design, and people-centered design is really exciting. So I'd say it's among the top of my list.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that too, because I think one other thing that we won an RFP for, not RFP, but we've been pretty instrumental in trying to think about how we can make affordability happen, and not just for the sake of affordability's sake, because I think our mission is to help decrease poverty and generational poverty by development, because that's kind of what's contributed towards that. And by brainstorming that, talking to the city, we kind of create a model for the city to figure out how they create this, like this permanent affordability in for sale housing. It's happened for rent, but for sale housing, to the point that we're probably one of the, even the small as we are, and I say small lightly, we're probably one of the larger players in the for sale affordability market there is in Atlanta right now. Just because we're creating the models, we're helping the city figure that out, and we're actually guys that do it, not just think about doing it, but actually do it.
And I think what's exciting about that is that in addition to being community-centered, another objective of Urban Oasis Development was to be innovative. Innovative in design, which Wole does a great job, but also innovative in new ways of approaching development. And so that affordability was a huge component. It's like, how do we create economic upward mobility? And that comes through home ownership. But how do you create a variety of price points so that you have an entry point and then you can build up from there? I remember, growing up in Atlanta and graduating from college and being able to buy a house after college, right? This used to exist. But in a city like Atlanta, where, prices were increasingly going up, that was largely being prevented, for a lot of people, coming out of college and even those who had been out of college for a while. And so we really were some of the first to think about affordability for home ownership, but also another model, which is permanent affordability. And what that means is it's one thing to make a house and create it as affordable for that first buyer, but what does it look like to always have that be a house that will be accessible for the second buyer, the third buyer, such that you create this nice little ecosystem where that first buyer has an entry point, they grow, they leave. Second person has an entry point, they grow, they leave. And so this really requires what's called a land trust cooperative ownership model that enables that process to happen. And so we've been very excited that we've been able to be a part of that and also to provide the right funding mechanisms to enable it. And so we've created the types of capital and subsidies in this city that now other developers, nonprofit and for-profit, can now utilize to do exactly the same thing. And so we were always about doing innovative product, but we also were about creating models that could be copied, because at the end of the day, if they copy things that we're doing that are right, that will mean more right stuff will get built.
Exactly. So 3 Palms is start off as a dream. And it was probably where we said, hey, we're gonna innovate the way people live in houses. And it started off with, again, some philosophical design ideas, but we wanted to take a step back and figure out how could you redesign a house different and better. And the problems we were trying to attack were climate change. Again, houses use some of the most energy in the country from an energy usage perspective. Mental health, just coming out of COVID, people were stuck in houses all day, every day, and just being confined in a house all the time is just not good for your health, and there are lots of other science that back that. And then in terms of just building from a design standpoint, lots of times houses end up being boxes, right? And as you go into production building, building a lot of housing, because there's a housing crisis. Again, the lower end gets pressed out, but design-wise, you just have these big boxes. So we say, how can we approach all these 3 things and do that in an innovative way? And so with the energy efficiency thing. We designed houses that could take solar panels that could power the entire house and possibly put more power back into the grid. So the houses can be, instead of being just users, they can actually be generators of energy in the country. From a health and wellness standpoint, houses that can actually be healthier. The fresh air comes in, dehumidification, natural light, the indoor outdoor blurring the lines, so you actually get outside and it's easy to get outside and get that vitamin D and get that fresh air and a piece of nature. So God forbid if COVID ever happened again, you didn't feel like you were stuck inside a box. And the last part, livable art, where you can actually see something that's beautiful, but then you can actually utilize that art. It's one thing to have a painting on the wall in a museum, but if you actually live in something that you pass by every day and like, wow, that's beautiful, and you actually live in that, and the parts of the house are art, or the windows of nature that you're looking out, that actually frame art, the part that you can actually just experience that, I feel like that just enhances your life. And so we want to bring all that together at, at the right price point that we could do this at scale. So this is the first phase of that.
And I think one of the great things about this project is, from an environmental and sustainability standpoint, Wole just mentioned a lot, but you can't forget about the social elements as well. And I will say that, when Wole was actually introducing me to Joseph Eckler and kind of this mid-century modern design, I knew about mid-century modern, but I think what most impressed me about Joseph Eckler was his impact from a social perspective. He was one of the, honestly, first builders to break all of the discriminatory practices around home building that existed prior to that point, which meant that you could not sell a house to people of all races and all kinds and creeds and things of that nature. He literally went so far against the grain that he was removed from the Home Builders Association at the time, of which he was a leader, because he said, no, I'm going to provide housing for any and everybody who can afford it, who wants to live there. And so it was really awesome to participate in not just the design philosophically, but also re-embody, the social philosophy, which is that we do want this same type of product to be available to everybody at all price points. It's one thing to talk about high performance housing and decarbonization, but is that available to not just the highest, income, but also to those at the medium and lower income levels. And so for me, that was a large part of what makes this project exciting.
Yeah. It's a good question. So to plan and execute, it does take teamwork. I think it first takes a vision. So thinking outside the box of saying, let's start from scratch. Let's figure out what we're trying to accomplish, and then figure out what that's going to look like. We start off with an idea, brainstorming, figuring out what's it going to take to do this thing. What problem are we trying to address? We figured that out. We got a team together. We got ex-metrical design, some great architects that believe in the vision of creating a more affordable, modern product, and put our heads together and said, let's put this together. And then we got the finances together. We got the budget together, and it took a lot of value engineering, because again, typically these houses are very expensive. So we had to go from an iterative process of designing these houses, one on paper, but then in the field coming through saying, that's a little too expensive, let's trade this out for this. All right, let's do this and that. And so pushing and pulling to get that together, even working with suppliers, like even when we're working with the suppliers for the sheathing, to figure out how we can continuously insulate the walls. We worked with Huber to figure out, okay, what's the right place where can we get this material to put that in there? How can we work with the subs to install this material? So it was fun, difficult, and complex at the same time, getting everything together, but it was a lot of collaboration and teamwork. But I think it all starts with vision. When they say without vision, the people perish. But in our case, we just started with the vision, and then it just slowly came together. And now just happy it's all come together, and hoping the rest of the world can see this. But our goal is, again, to start scaling this now that we've got this product down.
And I think, alongside of that, it really takes intentionality and courage. And I say intentionality because all of the vision and the elements that Wole, the team, so many folks had to be a part of, you always have to have a certain amount of intentionality behind that. And then you have to have courage, because once again, who's done this before? Nobody. Yeah. And there are a lot of naysayers and a lot of folks that this isn't going to work, or you're not going to make money, or nobody's going to buy it. And so the courage that was required for us to keep moving, is really important part of that as well. And so, at the end of the day, we did produce something, and I think it's something that's going to be very transferable across many projects in the future.
Yeah, agreed.
So there's several things about Urban Oasis Development that folks should really follow. And it really goes back to like our three core principles. One, that we're community centered. Our DNA starts with community. We're not about commodities and just buildings and sticks and bricks. We're always about people and how people interact, both with each other and with the built environment. Number two is innovation. Myself and Wole come from technical background, engineering backgrounds, and so we understand that innovation oftentimes contributes to better lifestyles and better outcomes. And so we're always looking for opportunities to embed innovation in the type of development that we do. And then finally, sustainability. Oftentimes people think about sustainability just from maybe an environmental standpoint, which absolutely is the case, and we're doing a lot of great projects that are enabling of that. But we also think about sustainability from a community perspective, which is what can we enable from the built environment that will allow that neighborhood to continue to grow and reproduce in an effective way, right? And then finally, we're a for-profit company. Even though we do a lot of missional, impactful work, affordable housing and everything, sustainability also means that you can afford to keep doing that. And so we do have to produce a level of profit that allows us to continue to, one, innovate, create community, and then, of course, hopefully empower and enable people's lives for the better.
I'd say shared values is probably the biggest thing. It was really odd when I remember us first doing our brainstorming session about how we're gonna formulate our mission and vision, and we wrote the list down on the wall, and it was just really interesting and comforting to see that we had similar missions and visions about what we wanted. And that's not just for the company, that was just more so in life, right? And then how we're gonna apply that to real estate development. And when you have that shared vision, the great thing is you feel like, okay, I'm not walking this path alone, nor am I crazy as well either, right? So you're doing this together. So let's figure out how to get this thing done. And so that's one thing that really helps this team work. The other thing I'd add to is the fact that we're action oriented. Again, we're not thinking we're going to be a think tank. We're not talking about just doing a bunch of panels here and there and talking about what could happen. We're like, this is the idea, let's test it out, let's make it happen, and let's measure our impact and make sure that's what's happening. So I think both of us having that same mindset has really helped this team just move forward in the direction it's heading in.
Yeah, and I think what makes this team work is, complementary skill sets, a high level of trust, and then also, just a willingness to be humble and have a high level of humility as well. And what I mean by each one of those is, we don't have the same skill sets. It's like, Wole arguably, I consider him the builder and really the brains of the operation. Great designs, great craftsmanship, great organizational skills as well. Whereas I think of myself more, a bit more people-centered, whether that be across fundraising, across relationship building, and things of that nature. When I talk about humility, I mean, we don't really have egos that fight over who gets the credit, and I think Wole arguably should get way more credit than me, but he never ever is like, oh, I want to be the face of this. Like largely, he never wants to be the face. He's like, don't tell nobody my name, let them know where I'm at. But that thing really works, right? Because it allows us to work effectively when we don't care who gets the credit. And then trust. I'll say, business partnership is much like relational partnership, like marriage. Which is if at the heart of it you have a high level of trust, you can really move much faster. And I never think about, hey, I got to look over my shoulder or think about what my partner's doing. And that goes back to also that we have common values. So yeah, that's what I mean by, those three things making us a high performing team.
Yeah. Thank you for watching.
You can learn more at urbanoasisdevelopment.com or on our social media at Urban Oasis DEV.
And make sure to like and subscribe to the video for more content and behind the scenes of Urban Oasis Development.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey and learning more about our vision, but we really love to learn more about yours. Thank you. Shalom.